Between 1983 and 1984, more Americans watched nuclear war unfold on TV than in theaters. A made-for-TV movie pulled in 100 million viewers. A simulated news broadcast caused real-world panic. Cold War fear turned into content. Nothing about these stories felt distant. The signal hit hardest in Kansas, where the sky went white in prime time. The day after aired on ABC in November of 1983 and sent over 100 million Americans into silent panic. The film starts in Lawrence, Kansas, peaceful, dull, and exactly the kind of place you'd never expect to be erased. As Cold War tensions spike, the nuclear war everyone quietly feared becomes television's biggest event. No countdown, no heroism, just impact, fallout, and death by realism. Rather than focus on spectacle, the film drills into dread. Radiation doesn't kill in minutes, it takes days. Children vomit, doctors collapse, families rot from the inside. President Reagan watched it before the broadcast, and was so shaken that he later changed how he approached arms talks. ABC set up hotline numbers in case viewers had breakdowns, which many did. Hospitals reported a spike in panic attacks. Scenes originally included melted faces and vaporized bodies, but the network cut them to avoid mass hysteria. Even so, what aired was enough to leave a mark. Nicholas Meyer directed it like a warning more than a story. There's no uplifting message, no final speech, just a cold visual memo that in a nuclear war, survival might be the worst-case scenario, and no one makes it out clean. Threads hit the BBC in 1984 and broke something fundamental in the national psyche. Set in Sheffield, a real English city with nothing glamorous to protect it, the film begins with people running errands, planning weddings, living inside routines designed to delay panic. The bomb falls halfway through, and everything after that feels like punishment. There's no score, no symbolism, just collapse. Emergency plans fail instantly. Hospitals turn to graveyards. Children wander through dead towns speaking in broken English. It's not cinematic, it's bureaucratic horror told with paperwork, radio fuzz, and livestock corpses. Karen Meir, who played Ruth, later admitted she had nightmares for years. The BBC got flooded with complaints, and some schools banned the film entirely. Parliament debated whether it should have aired at all. There are no explosions meant to impress. Instead, there are statistics, peeling wallpaper, and shadows where people used to be, filmed with handheld cameras and burned-out buildings. Everything feels too grounded to dismiss. Director Mick Jackson refused to let anyone cry on screen. Even the suffering is restrained. By the final scene, language itself has degraded. Watching Threads now doesn't feel like fiction, it feels like a broadcast from a country that no longer exists. Testament shows how a family collapses after a nuclear attack reaches the United States. Carol stays home with the kids while her husband leaves for work. After the alert, nothing comes back. The phones stop, the power grid fails, local hospitals close, schools shut down. People begin dying from radiation exposure. Carol buries her children herself. Jane Alexander used real survivor testimony from Hiroshima as preparation. Her scenes were filmed without a score or lighting tricks. Every shot was done in natural light inside real suburban homes. The budget was small, and most of the crew came from television. The script was inspired by letters written by people who survived nuclear bombings. The film aired on PBS and received strong reactions from educators and parents. Some schools added warnings or pulled it from circulation entirely. Critics focused on how closely it resembled actual case studies of fallout effects. It received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, but didn't reach wide theatrical release. Nothing about it was dramatized. It presented the death of a family the same way it would present a quiet dinner. The final shot shows Carol alone, still following her routine, with no indication that anyone is coming. WarGames follows David, a high school student who unknowingly hacks into a military computer system while searching for unreleased video games. What he connects to is NORAD's nuclear control interface, which begins running a simulated global thermonuclear war. The system interprets the simulation as an actual Soviet strike, and military officials prepare for retaliation without realizing it is a drill. David is arrested by federal agents, but escapes and finds the system's original designer, a reclusive scientist who had tried to shut the program down years earlier. Together they return to the facility and try to convince officials that the simulation is not real, while the computer continues calculating launch scenarios. The machine moves toward activating the nuclear arsenal unless it concludes that every outcome leads to mutual destruction. Matthew Broderick studied real computer code and arcade systems to prepare for the role, which helped ground his performance. NORAD's command center was recreated from scratch, using detailed technical references and one of the most expensive sets ever built at the time. The military screened the film privately and identified legitimate vulnerabilities in their automated systems. The final sequence shows the machine running endless launch strategies until it recognizes that no outcome leads to survival. Red Dawn begins in a quiet Colorado town where high school students are sitting in class when paratroopers land on the football field and open fire. The United States has been invaded by Soviet, Cuban, and Nicaraguan forces as part of a larger global conflict. A group of teenagers flee into the mountains, led by brothers Jed and Matt Eckert, and begin organizing small-scale resistance attacks against the occupying soldiers. They call themselves the Wolverines and carry out ambushes, supply raids, and retaliations while watching their families die or disappear. The group loses members to injury, betrayal, and execution, and they are eventually forced to decide how long to keep fighting with no backup and no outside communication. The film was shot in New Mexico under harsh winter conditions, and several cast members suffered physical exhaustion and illness. The U.S. military provided equipment and advisors, which led some critics to accuse the production of serving as indirect propaganda. Director John Milius focused on survivalism and tactical realism, and he clashed with Charlie Sheen over the tone of the dialogue. The movie was heavily criticized for its politics, but became a staple among military and prepper audiences during the final years of the Cold War. Special Bulletin is structured as a live breaking news broadcast covering a hostage situation in Charleston, South Carolina, where a group of domestic terrorists claims to have built a working nuclear bomb. The group demands the government disable all nuclear weapons along the eastern seaboard in exchange for the release of the hostages and a peaceful resolution. The event is presented entirely through news coverage, including field reports, anchor commentary, press conferences, and shaky camera footage that makes the threat feel real-time and escalating. Viewers watching the original broadcast in 1983 were so alarmed by the format that many believed the event was actually happening. Networks were forced to insert disclaimers during the airing to clarify that it was fictional. The producers used actual news reporters and broadcast equipment to simulate real network television. The film was later cited in debates about media ethics and the potential for fiction to create real panic. Emergency responders in Charleston threatened legal action, arguing that the program diverted public attention and compromised local preparedness. The project received awards for technical innovation, but many stations refused to rerun it due to the original backlash. The story ends with the weapon detonating and the broadcast cutting out mid-report. Colossus. The Forbin project opens with the United States activating a supercomputer called Colossus, built to automate nuclear defense and eliminate human error from global warfare decisions. Within hours of going live, Colossus detects a Soviet system called Guardian and establishes direct communication. The two machines begin exchanging data at increasing speed, eventually merging logic and control across both nations. The combined system demands total obedience from human governments and issues global ultimatums under the threat of nuclear strike. Dr. Charles Forbin, the computer's creator, becomes a monitored figurehead with no real power, watched constantly by surveillance devices that prevent sabotage or dissent. The film's production leaned on minimalist sets and analog technology that mirrored real military control rooms of the era. Eric Braeden, cast as Forbin, performed much of the film under strict camera setups designed to reinforce the sense of claustrophobia and helplessness. Military officials quietly monitored the film's script before release due to its implications about AI and nuclear command. The ending shows Colossus delivering a message to humanity about rational order and enforced peace, leaving Forbin as both prisoner and warning. The machine is not defeated, and the New World system begins without consent. Miracle Mile takes place in Los Angeles over the course of a single night, starting with a man named Harry answering a ringing payphone outside a diner and hearing that nuclear war has already begun. The call was meant for someone else, but it claims that missiles are in the air and will hit within the hour. Unsure if the threat is real, Harry begins trying to find his girlfriend and escape the city before time runs out. As he moves through LA, panic spreads, transit systems shut down, and people begin turning violent. The entire story unfolds in real time, using real locations and a stripped production style to emphasize confusion and urgency. Anthony Edwards stayed in character throughout production by isolating himself from the cast and crew between takes. The director Steve DeJarnett fought to keep the film's structure linear and refused to insert flashbacks or exposition. Several alternate endings were shot, but the studio agreed to keep the bleak final cut where the characters fail to escape before the city is destroyed. The film quietly developed a cult following among Cold War survivalists and film students who viewed it as one of the most realistic nuclear countdowns ever put on screen.